Just a quick note, this interview with Mark Mitchell was recorded prior to the Tongariro fire. Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. Mark Mitchell has heralded the government's promise to be tough on crime. He's been incredibly clear from the get-go that his primary goal is to make New Zealand an uncomfortable place for gangs to operate. He holds 5 portfolios: police, corrections, emergency management and recovery, ethnic communities, and sports and recreation. So how does an MP with so many hats feel about how his government has tackled the big issues? Today on The Front Page, Mitchell joins us to talk cops, corrections and communities. So first off, Mark, you're looking very comfortable. Whereabouts are you?
I'm at Morangi Bay Beach.
Morangi Bay Beach. And whereabouts? So just right on the beach there?
Yeah, I'm sitting right on the beach, and this is the beach when I was a kid, this is where I grew up. And that surf club, I don't know if you can see the surf club. That was my surf club. So it's not actually my electric because I ran out of time. I was trying to get back up to my patch, but I ran out of time. So I thought I'll go and sit down at Morangi Bay Beach and do the podcast with Chelsea down there.
So, Mark, we've seen a scandal this year at the top of the police chain. There's no denying that. Are you confident the public still has trust in the New Zealand police?
Well, I hope that they do maintain trust in our New Zealand police because without a doubt we have got a world-class police force. Yeah, and the size of the organisation that we have, there's always going to be the odd rotten apple in the barrel. And look, our police officers are out there every day, with tens of thousands of positive actions, protecting and supporting their communities, the communities that they serve. And I'd just like to say, Chelsea, that this week I've been to 2 police awards ceremonies, and probably 75% of the awards that I see handed out are to police officers that have put themselves in danger to save the lives of members of the public. When you see bad behaviour from a police officer, no one feels it more deeply than those thousands of both our sworn and non-sworn staff that are out there actually holding to and the values and ideals of our New Zealand police. No one feels it more deeply than them when there's someone that doesn't hold to those values. Is
it concerning to you, though, that rotten, if we're talking about rotten apples, that one of the rotten apples nearly got the top police job or was in contention for the top police job in this country?
Yeah, of course, that's a genuine concern. And I acknowledge that. All I'd say is that as the incoming police minister, there were quite a few issues that I had to deal with. And one of them was this case. And I'm sorry that I can't talk to the detail on it, Chelsea, but it's actually the case, although there has been a guilty plea put in, that's still before the courts for sentencing. So I can't talk to the case directly.
That's a good one. We'll move on to crime statistics. They show a sharp drop in alcohol-related violent crime. Since June 2024 to May this year, the fall in alcohol-involved offending accounted for actually 65% of the total drop in violent offending. Should the government do more to curb alcohol-related crime, do you think?
Yeah, I think that alcohol and drugs have always been a huge aggravating factor in terms of the perpetration of violent crime. Education has to continue to be a big part of that. The police obviously run very effective road safety programs to make our roads safe. We've driven down the rates of drunk driving significantly. But there's always different levers and different things that police are looking at doing and like providing advice to justice officials in terms of how we can continue to make changes that balance up the people's right, the responsible drinkers to have access to alcohol and be able to enjoy that responsibly against the ones that aren't responsible and public safety.
New Zealand's prison population, you'll be aware, is hitting record highs. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Look, I think any society would agree that we don't want to. We'd love to not have prisons, and we'd love to have everyone that lives in our societies and our communities respect one another and not hurt or perpetrate violent crime against the people in society that are law-abiding. But unfortunately, as long as humans have been roaming this earth, that hasn't been the case. And so we've been very clear as the incoming government that we are prioritising public safety. That if we have people in our society and our communities that don't want to stick to the laws or they want to hurt people, then, they are going to end up, and they keep persisting in that sort of behaviour, then they are going to end up in prison, in our correction facilities, because we want law-abiding citizens to feel safe.
Does it mean the government's stance on being tough on crime is actually working?
Well, it's working in the sense that the targets that we sent into a reduction of victimisations, we've already met that. In fact, we've exceeded that. And of course, you'd have to look at our response as a government, which includes increased. We've made sentencing much tougher. We have reduced the discounts that were allowed from, you've seen discounts of 70, 80%. We've kept that at 40%. And like I said, we've just, as an incoming government, we have, and as the three parties, as a coalition, as a coalition government, have been very clear that we are prioritising public safety.
What if it's working too well? I mean, we've already hit the population estimates within about 10,900 behind bars. Will there be more money in the kitty next year to address how many people are actually going to prison?
Yeah, so as of yesterday, there's about 10,800 in the prison muster, and corrections do an outstanding job. That is literally a daily event in terms of making sure that that everyone is in the right place and that we're dealing with capacity, and corrections do an outstanding job of that. Will the government continue to invest into public safety? Absolutely, because although there is a cost, of course, in incarcerating people and having them in the correction system, there is a much greater human cost and even economic cost to have them out in society, creating more victims and the havoc that they create and the trail of tears that are often sitting behind that behaviour and that criminal offending.
Well, critics argue that prioritising longer sentences, I see, does not actually reduce reoffending rates. How would you respond to that?
Well, the only way you're going to reduce reoffending rates is when those offenders genuinely want to change. They genuinely want to embrace making good decisions. They genuinely want to embrace and see what opportunity exists for them in this country. They genuinely want to embrace the training that is offered and the support that's offered them to come back and reintegrate with society in a positive way. Ultimately, that is how you'll drive change, is each individual wanting to make those changes in their lives and not wanting to make bad decisions and make all sorts of excuses for those bad decisions. All that we can do as a country and a state is provide them with the mechanism to be able to do that. And I know that we've got a big focus. In fact, we put $70 million additional money into rehabilitation programs in our correction services so that we give them the ability to have the best fighting chance. And when they do come out, they do make good decisions. But ultimately, Chelsea, it comes down to personal responsibility. It comes down to each one of those individuals wanting to make change. And until they actually want to make change, in my view, in my opinion, in my experience, you can throw all the goodwill, all the programs and all the investment you want at those people. They will not change until they want to.
As I've said before, gangs are not nice people. Minister Mitchell, Minister Goldsmith and I campaigned on cracking down on gangs and making their life as uncomfortable as possible. And that is exactly why we have passed the laws we have, to ban all gang patches and insignia in public places, to empower the police to stop criminal gangs from associating and communicating with each other, enabling the courts to issue non-consorting orders to gang members, and we're ensuring that greater weight is given to gang membership at sentencing as well, enabling the courts to enact even more severe punishments.
I remember when you first became police minister, you actually offered up, you were offering up people your personal phone number to see, if you do want to, say, leave a gang, I will personally help you. Has anyone taken you up on that offer?
No, I haven't had any. Yes, you're right that I have handed out my number to gang members that have indicated to me that they do want to lead change, they do want to make change, especially those gang members with families, so that because the most important thing we can do is break that intergenerational gang membership that impacts so negatively on the children that are born into that environment. So yes, of course, I'm on standby always to help those that genuinely want to make change, especially those with children. But the flip side of it is, as police minister, I've also been very clear that to help affect that change, if we have to make it very difficult to be a gang member in New Zealand, to be part of organised crime, to be part of a group that inflicts a massive disproportionate amount of harm on our communities, we're going to continue to do that as well. And the police have been very effective at doing that.
How do you reckon the gang patch ban's been going?
It's been hugely successful. It's been very effective. The feedback, I've just come from a public meeting right now where the feedback from the public's been extremely positive, and the frontline police officers themselves are really enjoying having those powers so they can reassert themselves, and the public can see that our police are controlling the streets and not be in that awful position that we were 3 years ago, where the gangs were controlling the streets, where they were coming out and taking over public places, intimidating members of the public, taking over our provincial towns, where they were shutting down public roads and the public couldn't move, our kids couldn't get to school. You haven't seen any of that in the last 2 years because the police have been so effective in putting together gang disruption units and making sure that they're proactive and using the new gang legislation. It's a good thing that people don't see gang patches around anymore because they're quite simply designed to scare and intimidate people.
So we'll move on to your capacity as Minister for Ethnic Communities. And I know that this is one that you probably haven't been asked about as often as your breadth of other portfolios, I suppose. But in that capacity, you condemned the Destiny Church march against foreign religions. That was back in June. It's pretty bone-chilling to see such a display in New Zealand and on our streets here. Do you think what's happening overseas, and I'm thinking of those images of, Nazis walking down streets in Melbourne, for example, do you think that's spilling over slowly to New Zealand, and are you worried?
Well, I'm working really hard as Minister of Ethnic Communities to fortify ourselves as a country, and we've got such diversity in our country. We've got leaders in every single one of our ethnic communities and our faith and religious leaders that completely buy into the fact that we should always protect what is so fundamentally important to our democracy, and that is the freedom to protest and the freedom of speech. But we can do that in a peaceful and tolerant way. And so a big part of what I've been doing as Minister of Ethnic Communities is working across all of our communities, all of our faith leaders, reinforcing that message around social cohesion, making sure that we don't see that type of violence start to wash up on our own shores here in New Zealand. Being mindful of the fact that we all see that we're seeing so much conflict and division around the world at the moment that we've got to work extra hard and making sure that if we have a community if we have a community in New Zealand that feels unsafe or is fearful, that we wrap support around them and do all that we can to make sure that we deal with that.
As part of this portfolio, and I guess your role as police minister as well, have you received any advice from your Australian counterparts about what the stark rise in this kind of thing happening in Victoria?
No, I haven't, but we can all see it, and I have been out to Victoria recently. I was out there a month ago with our commissioner for the service of Australian Victorian police officers out there, but you can see it out on the streets. And of course, yes, I came out and condemned Brian Tamaki and the Destiny Church because they have a right to get out there and a freedom to protest like everyone does. But that turned into really what everyone considered was overt violence when you start ripping flags, like specifically targeting different communities and stabbing them. That scares people. That is actually frightening, and so they should actually reflect on the way that they are carrying out those protests. So that applies to any group in New Zealand. There's a way to be able to get out there and protest and get your message across without resorting to sort of overt violent acts and the ripping and burning of flags and trying to scare people.
There is aspects of speech which should not be allowed. For example, people who, say, you should kill Chelsea Daniels. She's a very bad person and she deserves it. You probably have to edit this out. I mean, that's
I know, that's
wrong.
My new ringtone.
Oh, right. that would be wrong, and it's a horrible thing to say, and arguably incitement. There are legitimate restrictions on speech. But what's not a legitimate restriction on speech is saying, you can't say that because it's hateful or it will offend someone or hurt someone's feelings, because as soon as you give someone in society the power to enforce that, it becomes impossible to restrain that power.
Do you think there needs to be better laws in place that clearly outlines, I guess, what determines free speech and what determines hate speech, perhaps? Because that's a really tricky area, isn't it?
Yes, and we shouldn't go down that rabbit hole.
That's a whole other.
Well, it is, and the reality of it is that we must protect the freedom to the freedom of speech in this country, because the minute you start to impinge on that, where do you start? Where do you stop? And we all have the right to exercise our free speech. Destiny Church chose to exercise their right to free speech in the way that they did, and I chose to exercise my right to free speech by coming out and condemning what they did. What's
been your biggest achievement in any of your portfolios while in government so far?
Oh, look, that's a really good question. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing and the way that our police force has responded to our new set of priorities when we came into government. I just think the work they're doing is quite simply outstanding. The anecdotal feedback I get from the public, the results that we're seeing starting to flow through. I'm just so proud of what they're doing and what they're achieving. Emergency management, I've had 19 local states of emergency since I've been minister. We are making fundamental change in the way that we look at and approach these things. We've had report after report after our national states of emergency highlighting the issues that we need to change. We're doing that. We've got an investment plan coming through that I'll take to Cabinet. We've got new legislation that will provide us a much solider platform as a country to operate from. Corrections, look, without a doubt, I am so proud of our corrections service, all of our officers that are either in a corrections facility or out in the community doing community-related corrections work with, up to 25,000, 30,000 people at any one time. That is such a difficult, challenging job when they're dealing with some of the most violent and difficult people that we have in society, and there's tens of thousands of positive actions every week. My big focus there has quite simply been the delivery of rehabilitation and officer safety. SFO, they're doing great work. They've launched 2 products in the last 6 months, 2 trials that are very effective. They're just about to report back on one of those. Sport and rec, that's a great.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
You're juggling so many hats, Mark. Do you sleep?
Yes, occasionally.
Yeah, you must be all over the place.
No, I've got a great team, and I'm very lucky, and I've got a team that's been with me the entire 2 years, and I could not do it without them, and they're there right behind me the whole time, and they deserve huge recognition, and great chief executives, I'm very, very lucky, and that's enabling, and it makes a minister's job much easier. I'm just trying to think who I've left out there. We've got police, we've got corrections, we've got sport, rec, ethnic community, SFO. They're all fantastic agencies, and I have the privilege of having a front row seat, seeing the tens of thousands of positive actions. I get reports every week of the outstanding work that our corrections officers do. I was at Mount Eden Prison a couple of weeks ago. They saved the life of a prisoner. Like I said, I've been recently at the police award ceremonies, and sadly the only time that you often hear about corrections or police or any of these is when there's a negative story running in the media, and that's life, and I accept that. But you know what? There's just they do so much positive stuff for us in the country, and I just think we should be so thankful that we've got them.
Have you started thinking about next year's election yet, or do you even have time to think that far ahead?
No, not really, because there is so much going on. We're still doing some major reforms. I think we'll start thinking about the election as we move into next year. But no, right at the moment, especially with emergency management, I've been down the South Island for the last week. With the response and the recovery is just as important as the response. We're right in the middle of that.
Thanks for joining us, Mark.
So thank you, Chelsea. Thank you for having me on.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.